Hold on. I don't know. Okay, it's gone. Okay, so I love technology. I hate technology. It's fun. Okay. So my daughter's teacher, we had a meeting with her in the morning. And it was basically she has an IEP because of her dyslexia, and she gets extra time and other academic stuff to help her out. So we're sitting there with her teachers, and her ASL teacher is in there. Okay, and her sign language teacher is super nice, Mrs. Ronco, and she's sitting here having a conversation with us, and she's the least appropriate teacher to show up at this because it's ASL. Dyslexics aren't affected by ASL. Huh. Anyway, moving on. But that was the only teacher that would show up, so she came because she's wonderful. And she's sitting here talking with us, and we had a really nice conversation. That same night, it was back to school night, where you get to go sit in each of your kids' classes for 40 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is, forever in the chemistry class. Seems like forever. He's boring. No offense, sir. Okay, but anyway, Mrs. Ronco would get to her class, and we're like, hi. She goes, hi, whose parents are you? Looking at us, and we're like, my daughter kind of like, And I'm like, she goes, oh, as soon as we started talking, she goes, oh, you're Ella's parents. And I'm like, yeah. She goes, oh, we met this morning. Yes. She goes, sorry, I don't recognize faces very well. It takes me a long time to learn faces. And I said, oh, so you have prosopagnosia. Well, we talk about it in physio, and it's an exciting, and she goes, you're the only person who knows what that is. Well, I mean, it's my niche, but still. So prosopagnosia means that if I draw a face, what do you see? Lines. You don't see a face. You just see a pattern of lines. Because what makes a face? Call from restricted. Tempting. Hold on, might be kid school. Hello? Hello?
Yes, a pleasant good day. How are you doing today, sir?
Hold on. Say hi, class.
Hi.
Oh. A heavily affected Indian accent, too, and I was hoping he would talk to you guys. Sometimes they're hip and they answer the phone. Anyway, whatever. Okay, so that makes good recording. Okay, so how do you recognize a face? How do you know that it's someone's face or not?
You look right, and then this part of your brain, it lights up. You can feel it.
That was deep, man. Okay, so I'm gonna choose a face and see if you can feel it. He's not wrong.
Can we walk up and touch it?
Can anyone talk to
Okay, no, but you're not wrong in the fact that you have cells in your fusiform gyrus called master cells, and if I pull up a face of someone who's familiar to you, your brain produces an event-related potential. That area creates a burst of electricity, and you can feel it. But then what happens? Let's put this person up there. It's probably two P's, but they know what I'm talking about. Okay? That's not Johnny Depp. It looks like to me more. Okay, so, wow, she's pretty. Who's that? Anyway, so Johnny Depp got distracted. Okay, is this what Johnny Depp really looks like in his real life? It's kind of turning into Michael Jackson is what it looks like to me. Johnny Depp performs. There we go. There's a Johnny Depp that we recognize. There's the Edward Scissorhands version of Johnny Depp. Oh, Edward Scissorhand 3? Okay? So again, if I keep showing different pictures of different genres of this person, he has lots of different. Here's a grown-up looking one. Okay.
Any character played by Johnny Depp is always Johnny Depp.
It is, but it's pretty cool. I mean, I like a lot of the stuff that he does. I think he's cool. Okay, I don't know about his personal life, but I'm gonna start Googling after anyway. Now, but the idea is that when I put his face up, how do you know? How do you recognize him?
Because why is the run down? Memorize a pattern.
That's what I get. Okay, but the pattern of sequences of lines on his face, match a pattern of sequence you have for Johnny Depp. So could we reduce Johnny Depp's face to the minimum number of pixels to recognize him as Johnny Depp? Yes, and the research has done this. You can slowly pixelate the image to the point where you can still recognize it as a person, but you can't recognize who exactly it is. Then you just slowly up the resolution, and then there's a point where you immediately know who it is. We did this a bunch of years ago, and I can't find the thing that we made. I took Pam Anderson and Arnold Schwarzenegger, hyper female, hyper male, put them next to each other, and Gaussian blurred them out. When you put them next to each other, super blurred out, you can't tell the difference between the two because it's all blurry. But as soon as I start depixelating it a little bit, unblurring it, what happens? Characteristics start popping out. As opposed, pardon the pun, but yes, Pam Anderson has a definite female shape. What shape does Pam Anderson have? I wouldn't say nice shape because it's not my particular style, but whatever. Schwarzenegger has masculine shape. But he does. He has this ridiculously huge shoulders and arms and little tiny waist and legs. And he had relatively big legs for a bodybuilder in the day. Nothing like the guys do now. And the thing about it is that as soon as I start making these shapes, and if I was a little bit more adept at drawing and changing the ratios, you could actually definitely identify one as male versus female. Because you just need the minimum number of voxels, changing pixel to voxel, in order to identify a particular face or a particular characteristic. How does this work? Does it work from the top down or from the bottom up? Top-down processing means you recognize it. And then take it apart. That's terrible. I'll fix that. I'm going to fix it. So the top-down approach to understanding this is that you see the whole thing first, then you take it apart into its component images. Top-down. You're starting with the idea and you work your way down to the details. The bottom-up principle is the opposite. You see the details, and the details then make you see what it is. Which is it? But how do you know what it is unless you analyze the parts? So then, I'll tell you the truth. We don't know. No, okay, but it's cognitive. Gestalt approach to understanding this, the Gestalt means the whole thing. And this is the top-down versus bottom-up processing was an argument that they had for years. The argument that they had for years. Where do we perceive the sense first? This is what Wilhelm Wundt was doing. What are the basic bottom elements of consciousness that we were trying to figure out? But then, Nesser basically was saying that it's no, you see the whole thing and then you analyze the details. And the answer is the Gestalt. Do the two happen simultaneously? Yes. The two happen simultaneously. And I could try to, I just learned about 3 years ago how our nose smells stuff. It's complicated. Took me a while to learn stuff. It's really neat, but it's complicated. So I'm not going to try to explain it that way. Taste, we could go through taste a little bit, because taste actually works pretty well that way. Okay, we talk about wine tasting. But I want to talk about the eyeball, because I spent a lot of time understanding how the eyeball works. And I think about probably 5 or 6 years ago, I had one of those, while I was teaching my class, and somebody asked a question, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, I have an answer now. I didn't have an answer before. So I'm not going to bug too many people, Brian, for my my class. But what is Ryan? Sorry, not Brian. Ryan or Brian? Ryan. That's what I thought. I said Brian, and I'm like, oh crap, and then Ryan. Okay, good. Check it. So, how does our eyeball work? Someone from physio last semester. How does it work? Okay, your eyeball sees a bunch of lines. Okay? So if we were to go from the bottom up in your eyeball, bottom up processing in the eyeball, we start out with rods and cones. Right? So rods and cones without having to go into physio because you guys don't necessarily care. When light is on the rods or cones, it causes the nerve to fire. That was like 45 minutes of lecture right there. Okay. When light shines on the rods or cones, the optic nerve fires. So far, so good? So like in here, I can have this. It's not nearly as much fun as it is in the other classroom. But if I make it quiet, dark in here, okay, what happens to the ability to see the red? It improves. And again, it doesn't make a good recording because you can't tell that I'm turning on and off the lights. But then, if I turn the lights on full, what happens with the ability to see the red? The red has not changed intensity or luminosity or pixels at all. What has changed? So it's the light reflecting. So what your rods and cones are really seeing is the amount of light reflecting back. There's less red light reflecting back now. That we haven't changed the intensity of the light. We haven't changed anything about the light quality except what's around it. Does that make sense? So the rods and cones basically just see light. But rods and cones don't act by themselves. Rods and cones are layered in what's called a receptive field. I'm not going to put magic sparkles yet. Receptive fields are areas of rods and cones. Does this sound familiar? Okay, good. So a receptive field, picture it as an area. Okay? I'm going to draw a receptive field for you. I'm going to go over this way. Most of them are circular. Most of them are circular. If light shines in any spot in this receptive field, the nerve fires. This could be 1,000 photoreceptors. 1,000 photoreceptors. Any single one of those photoreceptors gets light shined on it. What will happen to the nerve? it'll fire. I am very popular today. Okay, so any light shines on that receptive field, that nerve fires. Okay? So far, so good? Overwhelming or easy? My poor physio class is struggling with understanding a single action potential today. All we have to do for here is just understand that's an action potential. Ha! Life's good. Okay, so some receptive fields are very small. You have an area in your eye called a fovea. One receptor per nerve. I'm actually exaggerating this to make a point, but in your fovea, where your eyeballs focus, you have very, very tiny receptive fields. Where would I have these giant ones then? Out here. Peripheral vision. What are peripheral vision good at detecting? Movement. We'll show you why here in just a second. Okay, now again, we are talking bottom-up processing at this point. Every single photoreceptor responds to light. When a light hits the photoreceptor, magic happens and the optic nerve starts firing. When light is not shining on that, what happens? It deactivates the optic nerve. Light shines, activates optic nerve. Light turns off, deactivates optic nerve. Is it absolute or relative? This is the key part. This is the most important part before I start drawing receptive fields. Is this absolute or relative? It's relative. Because what does light mean? Yeah, it's the amount of energy coming out. So when I turn the lights off again, Angie's going to completely fall asleep. Okay, look how bright this white gets when I turn the lights off. I like seeing all your faces glow on your phones. It's fun. Ethan. Okay. So why is this white so bright right now? Because the relative light in the room is less, therefore the relative amount of light here is more. Can you actually see it extend out where it kind of bleeds in the camera a little bit up on the lens? There's a little schmutz on the lens in front, and you can actually see it's distorted all the way out. It kind of disappears right about here. Okay? So somewhere right about here, oops, it doesn't let me write down there. It kind of distorts right out around there. Hey, wow, cool. As soon as I draw on it, what happens to the boundary? It goes away. It's a very faint line, not a very solid line. Okay. Yeah. I can't see it, but
Literally right where you put your pen.
yeah. I mean, I can guess where it is. But okay, so now, I happen to wear these things. What are they? These are reading glasses. I got my eyeballs lasered. Can I borrow your bad eyeballs, Bubble? You can't see this, but the rest of them can. Okay.
Eyes aren't that bad.
No, they're not actually. So what do you notice about her lenses? Oh, I'm trying to get it straight. There it is.
Wow, they focus really differently than yours.
Yeah, well, mine are reading glasses. And hers are, she looks like a little farsight and astigmatism on your left eye. Okay, thank you. Both eyes, yeah. So, why are mine square?
That's part of the lens shape.
Well, it's because they're trying. They're square because it's the shape of the lens, but also because all the light is being focused directly onto the back of my eye. I can't see things up close because I'm old. The lenses in my eyes don't bend and flex very much. A good friend of mine, Dr. Doyle, and my father-in-law, he is 70, they're both 71, 72. They don't need these yet because their eyeballs can still focus up close. And I always admire you young critters with your crazy little fonts on your phones. I mean, you can read mine from there, like the font on my phone. And I still can't quite see that.
All the way on the end of
Yeah, well, I got to be Carol Anderson. Anybody have her for Soch? She'll talk the whole class, and you're just waiting for them to fall off at your nose, and they don't. And she'll be like this for days, talking, and you're like, I love these Santa Claus glasses. I mean, I can see fine. These are 1.5s. They're very small prescription. But I like these because I can see over them and around them. They're like having bifocals for normal eyes.
Did you buy those over the counter, or did you actually get
My mother-in-law, when she passed away, left thousands of pairs of glasses everywhere. So this is just one in a sequence of very many glasses that I have from her. I have some Chanel ones, which are on point. Okay. I had a pair of really cool pink ones with like little horns on them that she bought as a joke, and my wife threw them away because she was annoyed that I was wearing them at school. Okay. I don't care. Okay, so now, but why do I need my light focused on the fovea to see my phone? I can't remember which one that is. But, okay, but what it means is I need the light to focus where the receptive fields are very small so I can see the difference between very small differences in light. The same thing as if you have an astigmatism, like here's astigmatism, okay? Do you have astigmatism or are you near or farsighted?
Nearsighted.
Okay, so everybody's glasses everybody's eyeballs are slightly different shaped. And if your eyeball is slightly different shaped, I'm going to draw an eyeball now. This is looking into the back surface of your eye. Your fovea is right in the center. Your optic nerve is right there. So you can find a little optic nerve test. You move your pen around, and all of a sudden there's a spot, like if I look right around here, it disappears. You literally can't see. But how come you don't notice you can't see a little spot right here? Your brain fills it in. It just guesses what's in the middle of that spot. And unless the BB's coming right there. Anyway, so used to shoot each other with BB guns as kids? Anyone? Yeah, good times. You always saw the BB right before it hit your eyeball. You could see it, like all the brass lines on it. Oh no! You can't duck. You can just go, this is going to hurt. Whack. I shot my eye out. Okay. So in the fovea, our receptive fields are very tiny. As we get outside the fovea, what happens with our receptive fields? They get bigger. Now explain what the receptive fields are. Remember, the optic nerve is where you can't see. There's no photoreceptors where the optic nerve leaves the eye. We could talk, you have a lot more experience with the eyeball stuff, and I really appreciate Miss Ferris works at an eyeball doctor, so she has way more information about eyeballs, which was so helpful during class, so I appreciate it. So, Stephanie, yeah, I couldn't remember. Okay, so the way that you actually see, okay? So I'm going to put this line up here. I want you to stare at this line. Okay? How do you see that line? I'm going to delete that and just make one line. Big fat line. No, I don't want a sparkles. I want a single line.
the receptor fields react to the line and activate, and that tells your brain where the line begins and ends.
So the receptive fields, if you stare at this line right here, and all you're looking at is the yellow versus the black. Yellow's a great color to use because it is very high contrast ratio to black. Human eyes see yellow and black very quickly. That's why a lot of poisonous creatures, like bees, are yellow and black. Because you see them very quickly. Yellow next to black. Well, red next to yellow will kill a fella. Yellow next to black is a friend of Jack. That's so you can remember that. Okay? But when you see this yellow-black contrast, you notice it very, very quickly. So watch. I'm going to transpose this onto the back surface of your eye. Almost to scale. Oh, I can do this. Haha. Okay. So where this overlaps in the eye, is I activate. I'm just going to color in the receptive fields that I'm activating. Those 4 receptive fields, 5 receptive fields are going to send information to the brain. So those 5 receptive fields are going to send information to the brain. Did you follow this so far? So those 5 go into my eye, into my thalamus, into my occipital lobe. And the occipital lobe pays attention. This is the part that really hurts, so brace yourself. Where those fields are relative to each other. So your occipital lobe pays attention to the orientation of those receptive fields. So this is so cool. So if I'm looking at the line right there, and then I turn my head this way, does the line change?
No.
Wait a second. It's all lumpy now. Okay. But if I draw this line, if I'm looking at this line and I turn my head sideways or I look at it upside down, is it still the same line? But if I turn my head upside down, isn't it now facing this way? How come it's not facing the wrong way when I turn upside down? Nothing to do with Venice. I don't know what you're talking about. But even if you are in, but even if I start rotating the computer around, checking,
You still recognize the same.
it won't work in Windows 10.
It's just like in a different position. Like
You still recognize the same line even though it's in a different position. So what the occipital lobe sees, I'm going to put this back on here somehow. There we go. What it actually sees is a particular angle. So without having to deal with the whole nonsense of physio, yay, when a particular neuron is firing, relative to another neuron, it tells us that there's a line of a particular angle. So if I move this over here, and it's activating different neurons, but with the same relative angle to each other, the same occipital lobe cells fire. Yeah.
Does this relate to like how you can read upside down?
Yeah.
And understand it?
Right. Reading upside down, reading right side up doesn't really matter.
You can still understand it.
Right. It's like I've done that a lot of times when I'm reading a book. If I'm tired but I want to keep reading, the book's sideways. I'm lying like this. But it doesn't really matter if you turn the book sideways or right ways. As soon as your eye starts following it along, it doesn't matter because the eye is a circle-ish. This becomes important in a few seconds for the people with glasses on. You just kind of pick out the lines. And the lines, you're not actually seeing the image. You're not perceiving the image that's actually there. What are you actually seeing? But what about the lines? You're seeing the angle of the lines. And there's one other important part that I didn't mention yet. Some of these receptive fields, which I'm going to draw them in purple, overlap the other ones. And in fact, some of these receptive fields turn off when light is shined on them. Some of them are turning on, they're called on center, and some of them are turning off when light is shined on them. This gets complicated. Why would some turn off when light is shining on it? Well, how do you know where the end of the line is? How do you know where the edge of this is?
Okay, that's what I thought to tell you where that is.
Yeah. So all of a sudden there's one here that's turning off. There's one here that's turning off. And now angle and then stop. So your eyeball is constantly doing math, constantly adjusting angles. So, but if you have astigmatism, what is an astigmatism? Well, yeah, the lens is basically not uniform across. So it focuses, so the line, as opposed to focusing a nice straight line, the line gets focused like, let me turn it to a nice bright white color. The line gets focused like this. That's your straight line. So what does your brain see when you look at that straight? Well, but it's blurry because is that one line or two lines? It's a couple lines put together. It's not one nice straight line. So if we take an astigmatism test, astigmatism test. I can't spell astigmatism, but Google can. Okay? So if we look at if you look at this right here, or look at any of the ones really, we'll make one of them nice and big so you can see it. There we go. Ooh, look at it, cool. Move. Look, it's waving at you. Hello, I'm waving. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So if you stare right at just look gently at the center of it. It's just so mind-blowing to me because take off your glasses, Christina, and look at it. Where do you start to see it getting blurry? So Travis, yours are right around here. This is getting blurry? Okay. Same for yours? It's all blurry. Okay, because I know your eyeballs are pretty bad. Okay, no offense to your bad eyeballs. But, okay, so where does yours look blurry?
Mine?
Yeah. So so when I used to do this, between 45 in this area, it would be completely fuzzy from this side to this side. I could see these just fine, but this side would all blend together and I couldn't see them. Yeah.
Is the center of that a circle or an oval?
It's a circle. Does it look ovally to you? It looks probably ovally to you because, okay. It looks probably ovally, and actually I can see it a little bit now that I've made this bigger. I have, right in the center here, these are closer together to me than the ones at the top. So that means my astigmatism probably isn't perfectly fixed. It actually looks fine on here. They should be equally spaced apart. But if you have an astigmatism, okay, and your eyeballs aren't exactly lined up, what you'll start to see is that you'll see some really bright lines and then some faint lines. Why would some be brighter than others? If they're lined up directly on the receptive fields, they will look dark and defined. If they're not lined up directly on the receptive fields and they're hitting two receptive fields or too many off-center receptive fields and they're not lined up right, then they will look blurry or, in fact, missing. There's a million different illusions that we use with this kind of stuff. How come it looks weird when I move it? Oh, that's really neat. Look at that. Look at the center. Can you see it?
Yeah, it goes around.
Sorry. The migraine, it's back. Okay. But when I move it around in a circle, you're shifting from left to right receptive fields. And so it looks like a new pattern is developing inside of it. Is it really? No.
It's like an optical illusion.
It is, well, it's a perceptual illusion. And the reason it's a perceptual illusion is because I'm not changing the actual environment around me. What I'm actually doing is providing information to you that makes you see things that aren't there. Yeah.
I like to, they used to fence, and one of my fencing coaches was a cognitive science major.
Cool.
And he liked explaining these things in ways that people who play video games could understand. If you look too fast, and the computer has to stop and redraw everything, that's what happens when you move your eyes while you're fencing. So every time you redraw, somebody moves, and now you just lost it.
Right, because if anybody doesn't know fencing in here, one of my friends in college was a fencerer, and and he would stab us with things all the time because he was super fast. Stop it. Okay, he actually just hit us with this swordy thing. Yeah. Okay, but right, I threw shot puts. Bring it on. Okay, but the thing about it is that every time your eyeballs move, you can't see things moving. So think about this when you're driving, please, or as a passenger. Look straight ahead at the car in front of you. And then as you're looking straight ahead, pay attention to the world around you. What do you see? It's hard to, you can't replicate this very well on a camera. But if I go to, let's see, go to, can I play, oh, I did it again. Anybody remember the shortcut key? Matt, my intro class showed me how to fix it. To make it stop doing the auto, I don't know. I'll just do it this way. All the crap that my son watches. Weirdest fake bodybuilders. I like it. Okay. Hey, live now. Hey, cool. How do I show, where's my videos? Oh, here. Aha. I'm going to play a video while in a video. Can you do that? It's on here somewhere. Oh, maybe it's not on here. There we go. That's waiting for my buddy Jim at the top of a hill. Okay, so the GoPro is kind of a neat device because everything is in focus. I'll mute it because the sound of my bicycle tire grinding along doesn't really help anything.
That's weird. That doesn't sound like a bicycle on the ground.
Well, it is, but it's resonating it to the fork because the GoPro's clamped on the bicycle fork. So the problem with the footage is that it does. What's wrong with the way the image looks when you look around? It's too much information. Because when you're actually riding, does the world look this jagged and bouncy and? No, because what happens is what you're looking at stays in focus. And as long as your eyes are trained on it, it's perfectly in focus. But what else is going, what all the other stuff that's going around, what's happening to it? It's blurry because your eyeball is basically taking a snapshot every 10th of a second, and then that snapshot is being sent back to your brain for processing. But is the movement still there? Yeah, so the movement's still happening. It's weird on the GoPro, because I watch this and it's like, you see it, and I'm like, I've ridden this trail 1,000 times. That little lake we just drove by is full of water, by the way. And trees. But the thing about it is that this looks weird because everything is in focus and everything is moving at the same time.
Was it raining?
It wasn't raining. It was dewy. That's a hard part to get over.
There's like warm weather stuff.
Yeah, this is one. It's just in the morning because you can see the skies. The sun will come out here in a second. It's just dew, just moisture in the air, in the ground. But when you're looking at this stuff and you're trying to see is this what it really looks like when I'm riding? Not from my mind's eye, because we filter out most of this noise. But I can pause this and stop it at any time, theoretically. Oh. Okay. Oh, that's my camera. It hit a bump and my camera went flying down. Okay. So then I get to look straight down at the ground. Okay. When you start going faster, it gets more fun. Should be some trail there somewhere. But well, every time I hit a bump, the camera starts pointing more down. And then when I get to, there's a big jump down here, and I go over the jump, and then the camera goes, and you can start to see the disc rotor. That's actually not bad. That's what it looks like to you if you were to just look down as you're looking forward. Because what's happening right here is the ground is going by faster than the camera can focus. So that's exactly what your fencing instructor said. If you shift your eyes off of whatever you're paying attention to, I'm not sure what you pay attention to when you're fencing. Is it the person's saber or their waists? Their hand. Okay. So if you pay attention to what their hand, if you take your eyes off of their hand and they see your eyes shift, can you see person's eyes through the mask? Okay.
You're kind of actually in the middle distance. If you focus on their hand, they'll do something like this over here. It'll draw your eye instantly.
As soon as your eyeballs move, there's a 1/10 of a second delay in what you're perceiving in the world. There's a 1/10 of a second delay. Because, and again, the whole idea is when you go back to how this works, all you're seeing is angles and stop signs. That's all we see, and colors. But that's all we see. So how do you, well, that's when we're going to start getting into the sensation and perception part in next week, or week after next. Is this easy or complicated?
Well, how does it line up with a top-down, bottom-up?
Because this is bottom-up ideas right here.
Okay.
This is all bottom-up ideas. So we'll do top-down next time.
Okay.
Okay. It gets worse. That's the problem. That's why you have to understand this before you take neuroscience. And that's what's fun about this.